Last couple weeks have been pretty rough for the Eagles. They have officially fallen out of the number 1 seed. They've had that for at least the last several weeks. The Cowboys have beaten them. The Niners have beaten them. And this secondary has been exposed. We talked about it a little last week, but the Eagles really struggling now. They're allowing over 30 points a game. They're allowing over 400 yards per game. Kyle, do they still have a shot at winning the NFC at this point, or are they falling a tier below the Niners and Cowboys?
Tier below, baby. It is not gonna happen for Philadelphia. I feel pretty confident saying it's not gonna happen. This was probably the most predictable result of the season in my book. I mean, one that matters. I mean, I'm not talking about like, oh, the Cardinals lost as 17-point underdogs to the 49ers. Like, the most predictable result of Cowboys need a win to take first place in the NFC East. Eagles need a win to hang on to the number 1 seed. Game played in Dallas. This was the result that Dallas establishes what the numbers have been telling us all season, what the nerd stats, the DVOs, the expected win-loss records, the SRS rankings, whatever nerd stats I like to point to, have been telling us all season. The Dallas Cowboys are a significantly better team than the Philadelphia Eagles. I know that's crazy to say, and I know the Eagles beat the Cowboys at home just about a month ago, but I'm telling you, the Dallas Cowboys are a better team than the Philadelphia Eagles. The Dallas Cowboys are the second best team in the NFC. And dare I say, in a world where the San Francisco 49ers don't exist, the Cowboys would be the favorite to go to the Super Bowl. This is the best team the Dallas Cowboys have had of the Dak Prescott era. Maybe it's the best going back to Tony Romo that they've had over the years. This team is the number 3 defense in the NFL as it stands right now. And their offensive ratings are a little bit wonky, but they are essentially 5th in the league in offensive rating at this point. They're a top 5 offense and a top 10 defense for the first time this millennia that the Dallas Cowboys have had a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. I assume at the end of this week, because of Kansas City's performance, they'll jump to number 3 in the DVOA rankings behind San Francisco and Baltimore. And the Philadelphia Eagles, they are sliding hard because this is not just a struggling defense. This is a bad defense. Yeah. And this is a team that has been incredibly lucky this season because the last 4 games were a gauntlet for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they find themselves at 10-3, which is a great position to find themselves in going into the playoffs, but they are really struggling.
Now, here's the interesting thing about it for the Eagles. While, yes, it sucks that you drop these 2 games, these important couple of games, they're still in a good position in the sense of where their final seed could finish, because I like their schedule a lot better than I like the Niners schedule. The Niners still have games against the Ravens coming up, a playoff-bound Rams team coming up. The Cardinals, now that they have Kyler Murray, they're kind of like a little bit of a wild card now. That schedule is a little tougher than what the Eagles have coming up, which includes 2 Giants games left on their schedule. Seahawks team this week, a Seahawks team that just dropped their 4th game in a row, possibly going on 5 in a row, and the Eagles should come into that game pretty damn motivated, and if they face Drew Lock again, they should very well win that game. You look at the Cowboys' strength of schedule, they still have to play Miami and Buffalo. So I still feel like the Eagles, in terms of seeding, are in the driver's seat in who controls their own destiny and whatnot. Now, they lost that ability to just win out, and they would be the number 1 seed, of course, because the Niners can still win out on even that tough schedule. Again, they just need to win the games ahead of them, though. The Giants, again, Tommy DeVito, you should be able to crush Tommy DeVito a couple times with that defensive line. Now, if that secondary gets roasted by Tommy DeVito, then that really secures it. You're not battling for the Super Bowl this year. Can they still get that first round bye, which we know is just going to be all that important? Will they face the Cowboys again a 3rd time potentially if they get that 1 seed? They still have that possibility ahead of them.
Yes. However, I don't think getting the number 1 seed, I mean, the first round bye is huge. Let's put that out there. The first round bye is huge for Philadelphia if they get that, because that would just give them the opportunity to recover that they so desperately crave. And we can talk more about like why the Eagles have started struggling and this thing about once you've played about 32 or 33 games within about a 14-month stretch, which is what the Eagles are working on when you talk about preseason games, a Super Bowl run last year, then getting to this year playing for an early bye week and then having games back to back to back for months on end. You can talk about why this is starting to happen, but the Philadelphia Eagles, a home playoff game against the 49ers might not be as valuable as you think it is. Now, it's better than going on the road to play the 49ers, granted, but 49ers at Philadelphia would be at least a 3-point favorite right now. The Cowboys at Philadelphia would be a favorite in that game. Like the Eagles are a tier below those teams right now. And if they get the number 1 seed, it will be because they've had a lot of lucky 1-score wins this year. Their expected win-loss record in their last 4 games, and granted, they've played 4 of the 6 best DVOA teams in the NFL the last 4 weeks. They played Buffalo, Kansas City, San Francisco, and Dallas, which are 4 of the 6 best teams in the NFL so far this season. If the Eagles had played those games according to what expected win-loss record says, they would have had 0.7 wins in those 4 games. Like, they got beat in all 4 of those games. Just Buffalo pissed the game away. Marquez Valdez-Scantling dropped the winning touchdown, and then they got the brakes beat off them by San Francisco and Dallas. Like, they should be, according to expected win-loss record for the season, either 7-6 or 8-5. And they happen to be 10-3, and that's going to be valuable. But they're kind of in the same tier as the Detroit Lions in terms of performance they've put on the field this year, which is a tier below San Francisco and Dallas.
Well, that's an interesting debate I've seen circulate. So again, you mentioned the value of the first round bye, and I agree with you. I think having that first round bye is a powerful thing at this time of year. Get your players some rest, get your stars the ability to heal up. But Niners fans are even weighing the possibility of, well, if we do get the 2 seed, then we don't have to play Philly and the Cowboys. We get to face Detroit and a combination of Philly and the Cowboys. Do you think that there's more value in that, like that strength of schedule? Because, you know, you're the 2 seed, you get that matchup with the 7 seed. That 7 seed right now could be either be a surging Packers team, a Rams team that seems to have figured some things out, or even this impressive defense, actually, that the Minnesota Vikings have had, albeit their offense is terrible because Joshua Dobbs regress, bench for Nick Mullins this week.
Let's not underestimate the Detroit Lions' ability to be the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions might piss away that first home playoff game this century as the 3 seed, which means that the 2 seed would have to then play the 5 seed instead of the 2 seed having to play the Detroit Lions. So let's not underestimate the Lions' ability to piss this away. Remember, this happened last year. The Vikings were the 3 seed. Niners fans were saying, oh, it'll be okay. We'll play the Vikings in the next round, and they're frauds instead of having to play the Cowboys. And guess what? The fraud Vikings lost to Daniel Jones's Giants, also frauds, and the fraud Giants got to play the Eagles, and the Niners had to play the Cowboys in the second round. So don't underestimate the Detroit Lions' ability to piss this away and take away your chance at avoiding the Cowboys or avoiding the Eagles in the second round of the playoffs. Just play it as it may and see how the results fall if you're a Niner fan. And if you're an Eagle fan, it's better to have the number 1 seed than not. However, the advantage you're getting is more the home playoff game, because beating the crap out of the Falcons in the first round of the playoffs is a little bit of a buy in and of itself. I mean, we saw the Cowboys beat the crap out of Tampa Bay last year, and they got to sit some players in the second half, and that kind of served as a bit of a buy for them. But it's not as great of a competitive advantage, because the thing that was a greater competitive advantage for the Eagles getting the 1 seed last year was the Eagles being the best team in the NFC. That was a pretty damn good competitive advantage for them. And so it's not true. The case this year.
It's true that there is the advantage in facing a lesser opponent. You can still blow them out, but, you know, people still tear ACLs in blowout, still pull a hamstring in a blowout, still get their finger banged off a helmet in a blowout. So stuff like that, you know, you don't want that impacting your potential rest of the season. What if, like, you go out there and someone essentially Brock Purdy's your quarterback? You know, you just don't want that type of stuff to possibly affect your chances at a Super Bowl run. So the less games you have to win to get to the Super Bowl, the better. The Eagles, the problem is it's not really even a question of can they get healthy if they had a first round bye, right? The question is, do they have good enough talent on the roster? And defensively, it's just not seeming like that talent is there, because again, I've just mentioned they're allowing over 400 yards per game over their last 6-game stretch. You mentioned they're just getting by the Bills and the Chiefs respectively before the 2 blowouts. They're allowing a lot of points. They're allowing a lot of yards. Their defense, it just doesn't seem like there's an answer there. And someone pointed out, too, Nick Sirianni is not a play caller, so he can't really take over the offense and change their course where they are offensively if he doesn't like some of the calls game made there. He just kind of has to stick with his coordinator and hope his coordinator can figure it out. And offensively, they also seem to be a little bit out of rhythm. We saw the Eagles sign of the fans putting out there, run the ball. They need to get back to their roots. They need to get back to running the ball because DeAndre Swift's great. DeAndre Swift behind this offensive line, we've seen him have some big moments this year, but they've just gotten away from that. They've gotten a little bit too pass happy. It hurts when you fall behind in games, and maybe if they jumped out to a 14-0 lead against the Niners instead of a 6-0 lead against the Niners, things would have been different in that game because they completely go away from the run. They were trailing all game against the Cowboys, so they didn't really get a chance to run the ball as much in that game either. That's a problem. It seems like the Eagles also need a lead to be able to win in these games, and they've fallen behind early and often, so that's also a bit of a problem for them.
Additionally, with their passing attack, Jalen Hurts isn't the greatest passer in the world, but we'll save that for another day. In the passing attack against the Cowboys, they targeted 3 players on 97% of their passes in the game against the Cowboys. It was A.J. Brown, who had 9 catches in the game, I believe. DeVonta Smith, who had 5 catches. Dallas Goedert, who had 3. And remember, Dallas Goedert broke some bone in his body earlier in the season and missed a month. So Dallas Goedert's still playing hurt. And then they had 1 completion to some guy named Alamadius Zacchaeus. That's their entire passing attack. It is so A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith dependent right now because they have no other receivers in the offense. And Jalen Hurts has gone tunnel vision on throwing to those 2 guys specific. And yeah, throw Goddard in there to mix things up a bit, but they've gone tunnel vision on those 2 receivers.
In fairness, relating it specifically to the Cowboys game, the fact that both DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown fumbled in that game, it made the matters even worse because those are guys, of course, you're counting on. And then them having big time turnovers. Jalen Hurts, obviously, they showed the turnover graphic for him too this season. His turnovers are up across the board. That's also a bit of a problem. Ball security is a huge factor in can this Eagles team win? Because if they turn over the ball, if they have dumb penalties, their defense is not good enough to keep them in games.
And that's why the Eagles are running the ball so much and why their offense is so run dependent, because the Eagles want to win games the way that the 49ers were winning games back in 2019. They want to win a 20-17 game where they dominate time of possession. They're the team that's adjusting to the modern NFL because the thing that they do better than any team in the NFL is run the football. So why don't we just run the football early and often and do it for the entire game, muck things up and slow it down? That's the thing that they do really great. And you mentioned DeAndre Swift, and I've just been laughing all season at how you swap that offense, and now Miles Sanders looks like DeAndre Swift in Carolina, and now DeAndre Swift looks like last year Miles Sanders in Philadelphia. It's incredible how that worked out.
I don't know. I think that's disrespectful, DeAndre Swift. I liked him in Detroit.
Sure, he was fine. Miles Sanders has been fine for a terrible Panthers offense this year. But besides the point,
like Chuba Hubbard has been taking away his snaps.
That is true. Chuba Hubbard has been fun. I don't know why they didn't just stick with, well, I know why they didn't stick with Chuba Hubbard, because the owner makes
Panthers
a lot
are
of decisions. Yeah, pretty much. Anyways, so yeah, the offense is best predicated on running the football. And as much as we talk about DeAndre Swift or talk about Boston Scott, who's been around for so many years now, and Kenneth Gainwell, their best rushing attack is with Jalen Hurts. Their best running back also happens to be their quarterback. And that is a great competitive advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles to work with. The problem is they're asking him to throw the ball a lot, and he does. Like, I didn't think losing Zach Pascal would make a difference in that offense, but like, they legitimately don't have another receiving threat outside of A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith and occasionally Dallas Goedert. They're not even doing checkdowns to the running back anymore. They're not even like pass catching running back plays. Yeah. They are just tunnel visioning on A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith.
I think that's a mistake, because I think DeAndre Swift as a pass catcher too is an underutilized resource for this team. If they just used him in more checkdowns or designed passes, I think that this offense would run a lot better, run a lot more dynamic, because he's shown an ability to be a pass catching running back, and they just haven't used it much.
You have a Boston Scott for a reason. He's been on the team through like 3 coaching regimes now. Use your Boston Scott. It's fine. Just let him cast passes out of the backfield. That's all he's doing on that offensive side of the ball. Just throw passes to Boston Scott and let him work through the seams in the defense. It might work out, it might not, but it's better than not trying, because the A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith thing is going to get stale real quick when you just bring down the 2 high safeties and have them double team A.J. Brown every time, which, by the way, is exactly what the San Francisco 49ers did for a good portion of that game 2 weeks ago. Just bring down the safety. It was Gibson in that case, I believe, for the Niners. It was either Gibson or Jair Brown, but you just bring him down and just let him sit there. And anytime AJ Brown goes over the top, Charvarius Ward follows him, bring the double team. You've taken away their basic receiving threat, and it works on both sides of the field because you can play both safeties up. And if you're a team that can get pass rush with 4, which the Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers both are really good at getting pass rush with 4, or maybe a blitzing linebacker if you want to feel spicy, those teams can defend you pretty well in the passing game. So the Eagles want to stick to what they do best, which is running the football. But this Philadelphia Eagles team is not going to be able to make a deep playoff run by just running the football, because the defense is not as good as last year, and the passing attack has become more stagnant and predictable than it was when AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith were first playing with each other.
Let me ask you something more big picture when it comes to the Eagles. So obviously we know that Jalen Hurts got a big contract. AJ Brown, he's one of the highest paid wide receivers in the game. DeVonta Smith still in that rookie deal, so he's eventually going to get paid here coming up soon. Kelsey has talked about retirement already. Lane Johnson also on the older side. Do you think that their Super Bowl window is already closed?
Yes and no. Like, they're going to have to reinvent themselves around Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts now has gotten the big contract. And look, we trust Howie Roseman more than I think most general managers to make the talent evaluations on that. I mean, they got rid of Javon Hargrave, added Jalen Carter, because they just were willing to take a first-round pick a year later than the Saints, who essentially traded Trevor Penning for Jalen Carter, which is not looking like a great trade in hindsight now for the New Orleans Saints. But because of the draft capital that they've invested in younger players, maybe less so on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I know they took DeVonta Smith in the first round, but they haven't really deeply invested in the offensive side of the ball. But all those Georgia players on defense should, once they get more repetitions and once they get more playing time, should help bolster that defense a little bit, like Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean. Carter's already starting as a rookie. Keely Ringo, who they picked as a corner, is someone who should one day replace James Bradbury as the number 2 corner if everything goes right. I mean, Keely Ringo's a former 5-star prospect who didn't have the greatest college career and fell to the 4th round, and the Eagles were able to scoop him up.
Well, they did trade
those guys should help.
Bayard, and Bayard's obviously on the older side and everything, so who knows how long they'll be able to keep them. So, I'm worried about their defensive backs. And Howie Roseman traditionally hasn't invested much in linebacker. We get a couple rental players in here like Shaq Leonard. They drafted, obviously, Nakobe Dean, hoping that he would turn into something for them as a linebacker as well. But it kind of makes you wonder if their back 7 will ever be up to snuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, they don't necessarily need to invest in the offensive side of the ball because the offense is pretty set right now. I mean, AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts are going to make a lot of money, but I don't think anyone's saying that AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts are not worth the money that they're getting at this point. Obviously, DeVonta Smith is going to get extended at some point, and that'll make up a portion of your cap. They just have to reinvent themselves a little bit. They have the foundation of a team that will be in the playoffs every year for the next 5 years. I feel pretty confident saying they will be in the playoffs every year for the next 5 years. I don't know if they'll put together a team as good as what they had in 2022. And granted, this year's been a little bit of an anomaly because I think these guys are just like physically hurting right now. Like, they've played so much football over the last 14 months that I think some of these players are just physically hurting right now. And especially those guys on the defensive side of the ball, like Bradbury and like Darius Slay, are just running out of gas a little bit. And even some of the offensive line guys are just, feeling the wear and tear of a deep Super Bowl run.
Can I throw something out there to you?
Year.
So you mentioned DeVonta Smith potentially getting extended. Don't you think DeVonta Smith probably has value as a trade asset? If you're keeping AJ Brown, which I assume you're keeping AJ Brown because he's a top 5 wide receiver in the league, DeVonta Smith, all the things people were saying about him in the draft, smaller guy, speed guy, seems slightly more replaceable than AJ Brown if I was to trade a wide receiver to try and fix my defense. What do you think?
He is, so he is more replaceable, but that doesn't mean you should replace him. Like, the reason you trade DeVonta Smith is because you don't think that you can you think that you can find another DeVonta Smith, or at least a replacement at value for DeVonta Smith. And I wouldn't do that. DeVonta Smith is really, really good. Like, I know people talk about his size and stature and stuff, but like, he's been a really good wide receiver this year. I don't know if you want to put him top 10, top 15, but he would be a number one receiver on a lot of teams. And I don't feel like they should let him go.
That's my point. A lot of teams might value him as a number one and be willing to offer more to get that piece back. So like, if I just need to trade a wide receiver to fix this defense, because I do need to fix this defense. My offense is already maximized with these 3-4 pieces that I already have, with Dallas Goedert now back. I have invested money at running back with DeAndre Swift. I've invested money at quarterback with Jalen Hurts. I've invested money with AJ Brown. Maybe I need to move a piece on offense to get better somewhere else. And as far as looking around, like pieces on offense they could trade, you talk about an extension coming up. People talk about this with like Brandon Ayuk for the Niners. Maybe that's the move.
As long as you have a vision, and you stick to it, I could get behind it. Because like Kansas City traded Tyreek Hill. It's not like I'm going to say DeVonta Smith is an untradeable piece. I just would have no problem paying him wide receiver one money while also paying AJ Brown wide receiver one money. And maybe you argue the wide receiver position doesn't carry that level of value, especially in an NFL right now where offense has plummeted and the Eagles' strength is running the ball. But I would have no problem paying both of those guys wide receiver one money. While at the same time, I agree with your assessment on DeVonta Smith. It's like, yes, he is the piece that you look to and say you can't extend everyone. So if a team is willing to offer a first round pick and another day 2 pick, value slightly less than what the Packers got for Devontae Adams, maybe you consider that trade. Absolutely. But I personally would have no problem paying DeVonta Smith wide receiver one money if I'm running the Philadelphia Eagles, just to have those two receivers with Jalen Hurts for the foreseeable future. I personally wouldn't have a problem with it, while also I agree with your assessment on the merit of trading DeVonta Smith or going into this offseason, looking at what he's looking for, because they can start negotiating this offseason. This is year 3 for him. So they can start negotiating an extension if they want, see what he's looking for, and maybe, wait a year, wait till after his 4th year, come back to the negotiating table while he still has the 5th year option and see what you can get from there. I see the merit in that assessment. I'm curious to see what direction they do go, because I think you're right. He could be a piece that they trade to collect more assets, while also they could also extend him and have those 2 wide receiver positions locked in. And I don't think it would be a bad contract.
How are you fixing the Philadelphia Eagles? Short-term, long-term vision? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Juju and Kyle. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.